All right, we got Dave Ross in the house, my man, longtime broadcaster, north of 50 years of broadcasting. How are you?
I'm fine, doing better now that I see you.
Good deal. Well, first of all, I got to ask you this. I mean, we're doing veterans voices. You're an Army veteran. You served a couple of years in the Army. I got to ask you, first of all, what was it like to serve in the military, and what did it mean to you that you are a military veteran?
Well, I think it was a very good experience for me. I had gone through college, and in college, I took up ROTC. So when I graduated, I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Army. And my first assignment was a place called Tobyhanna Army Depot up in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, not far from Scranton. And I was the information officer. And it was good because I was able to do, they had me do like a weekly report on Tobyhanna Army Depot, that were sent to 7 or 8 radio stations. But the key thing was that because of that, a station that was radio TV combined in Scranton sent me a letter and said, "Would you be interested in doing sports on weekends at WDAU TV in Scranton?" He says, "If you come down for an audition and we like it, we'll hire you." So I went down for an audition and they hired me. So I did the 6 and 11 o'clock sports on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And in between the sports, I would do a DJ shift on their radio station, which was country music. So that was what I did. And then after my year there, I went on to Vietnam.
Well, talk about your experience over at Vietnam, because I'm sure like that's a conflict. People call it a conflict. I call it a war. I mean, it's not the most popular thing to do. Vietnam vets, the way they were treated, it was just ridiculous. But just talk about your experience and what you did over there.
Well, as I say, when I finished there at Tobyhanna and they assigned me to Vietnam, they put me at the Southeast Asia Signal School, and I was the detachment commander. And what the Southeast Asia Signal School is, it was where we worked with Vietnamese, also other Koreans, things like that, working on communications equipment so that they would become very well suited for that and being able to handle it. And so I did that when I was there. So I wasn't, I was not out in the boondocks or anything like that. And it was, it was a good group because there were not only career like non-commissioned officers, but also a lot of young guys who were, you know, out of college or high school or whatever who would join the Army. And it was a good group of individuals.
I guess this is kind of like a weird question. And obviously, we're getting your broadcasting, obviously, which is legendary. But what did you feel that you took from your military experience that you're using even today or even throughout your life that you're applying to what you're doing today? Because obviously, broadcasting is also what you're doing. But what did you take from your military experience and applied it to your broadcast career?
Well, the things I learned from the military was that, again, you, as I would be in charge of others, but then others who were in charge of me, so to speak. So I learned the importance of working together, of also being able to relate well to those that you are in charge of, and also those who are above you, and realize that you have a job to do and you do it to the best of your ability.
That's fascinating. So, getting to your broadcast career, which is awesome. I love talking to you about your broadcasting career. So, you were in Utica, and then you got the call to come to Roanoke in 1975 at WSLS as the sports director. So how did all that come about? Because I mean, again, I mean, your broadcasting career started in the '60s and it's going on strong today. But how did you go from Utica to Roanoke, WSLS?
Well, the way that happened was, of course, one of the reasons I was able to get that job in Utica is after I got out of the service, I started applying for jobs. And that's why it was good to get that job in Scranton because it enabled me to have tapes that I was able to send to stations. And that's how I got the job in Utica. And then there were, there used to be, I don't know if they still have it, a thing called Broadcasting Magazine, and they would have openings for different jobs. And I guess I saw one there for this station looking for a sports director. So I sent a tape and they interviewed me, and eventually I got that job in Utica.
That's something. And then obviously getting to SLS because so you've been in Roanoke and broadcasting since '75. I mean, obviously
Correct.
SLS.
Correct.
Uh, and growing up, I watched you at SLS, and I was a big admirer of you. And I know you laugh at me when I tell you that, but it was. I thought you were pretty cool at what you were doing. And then for me personally, I tell you this. So after you left SLS, I always wondered, well, where did Dave go? And then I heard you do radio games, and then finally you ended up at APR, doing football.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
before we talk about that, just talk about because you covered a lot of big events at SLS. I mean, you covered Virginia in the Final Four, the Henson Heave, which is something
Yeah.
that is unique. But
Yeah.
just talk about some of the big highlights that you had during your time at SLS.
Well, before I do that, to tell you about SLS, again, let me tell you about Utica. One of the good things about that was it was only 20 miles from Cooperstown. So I'd get to go to the Hall of Fame ceremonies each year. And that was great because I got to interview people like Satchel Paige, Warren Spahn, and all that. And in Roanoke, like you say, uh, getting to go to the Final Four. And that was one of those things where I was doing sports and I wrote to find out what do you have to do to if Virginia makes the Final Four. And they said you have to have somebody at each of the, places on up to it. So I couldn't get it. I think one of the games was in Atlanta or somewhere, and I couldn't go to that. So I got a hold of a guy who I knew was a big, Virginia fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, can you go down to Atlanta? Would you like to go down there and, say you're with SLS and that will make it so that we covered all the way through. And so that enabled me to get a press pass to the Final Four because I was the only one that had gotten somebody to go to each one of the venues.
Oh, that's something. And then obviously when the Final Four happened, you had the assassination of
Yes.
President Reagan, and I'm sure and you were up there in Philadelphia. Just take me back to that time because there was talk about them maybe not playing anything at all when that happened.
Right. Well, of course, that happened after the game that I was at was the Saturday game, and you know that was a case where didn't have a problem then. You had then because Virginia lost, I wasn't along with my videographer. I wasn't staying there, because they were done.
Right.
Other than then they did do the consolation game, but that was it. But then, as you say, they had the Reagan shooting, and I wasn't up there when that was. I had already left.
So then, obviously, you had this opportunity to do something that since 1986, some form or fashion has been a TV or online broadcast of high school football, and you got it here at our station, which at the time is WWCW, but back then it was JPR, and then WVFT, which is now WFXR. So in essence, you started high school football coverage in 1986 at our station doing game broadcasts. Take me back to how all that got started and all that.
Well, I was at, there had been an article because, of course, JPR was fairly new back then. And Lon Morelli was a fellow's name who was, I think, the sales manager of the station there. And they had written an article about him. And he said would like to get into doing, you know, broadcasts of high school games and so forth. So I got in touch with him and said, well, I did that because I actually did some of those games up in Utica. And so he got together with me and, well, we'd like to have you do it. So we tied up with, I can't even remember way back then who it was, but it was somebody, I think at Cox Cable, who had the equipment. And that's when we started doing the games in '86. And that was our first year. And in that, I think the first game we ever did was Patrick Henry in Salem. And then we went and did a few more games there, which included both, Roanoke, New River, and Lynchburg teams. And then when Salem made it to the state championship, which was in Hampton then, I was able to go down there and do that game. And we had, again, somebody who did it. But I lucked out down there because that's back when they had Home Team Sports. Mm-hmm. And Home Team Sports was there doing the game. And as luck would have it, the guy who was the director of that game was from Bowling Green, where I went to college, and I knew him. So he said to me, do you want to just do, your pregame things, and then you can just take our feed and we'll feed it into your, video, and, you'll just have your audio doing it. And I thought, man, are you kidding me? So we had, it was great because it was Home Team Sports. They had instant replay and all these other things, and it was very fortunate. So I got to do it, and it was really, that's where, you just are lucky out where you happen to be at the right place at the right time.
I gotta ask you, when you first started it until throughout all the years that you did these broadcasts, whether it was on JPR, VFT, DRL, My 19, WWCW, and now you're doing online with Carl York, the great crew at Crunch. What has the response been to these broadcasts over the years?
Well, I don't know that it's phenomenal, but what I do know is where I will get somewhere and a guy says, well, you did one of my games. I have a VHS tape or whatever. And in fact, it's funny because this past Crunch game we did was PH and Fleming, and it was their Mayor's Cup game, and where we were set up was right by the tent where they had the mayor was up there and some of those folks, and they had a policeman up there, and I talked to him, and he said, well, I played here at PH and you did one of my games when I was here. And I thought, wow, see? So I get a lot of comments from individuals. Well, in fact, coming up, next Friday, Aronde Barber's coming to Hidden Valley for their and Cave Spring and all that. And he is, I was able to do games involving him. Tiki Barber, because both of them were with Cave Spring back then. I mean, the names of the folks that I think of who played, because, and I know you'll remember Keith Hamilton, who was at Heritage, went on to play for the New York Giants. You had Reuben and Cornell Brown. I mean, a lot of really outstanding players, and the guys like from Salem, like Dennis Haley and that crew. I mean, I've been very fortunate to cover some outstanding players in football as well as basketball with like the JJ Reddicks and Russell Turners and all that.
And not only that, I mean, even during your time at JPR, you did ODAC stuff. You also did shows. You did high school preview shows. You talked to a lot of great coaches. So you really in our area from like 86 even to now, you really had your hand not only in the high school, but the ODAC, and you also had
Yes.
your hand in the hockey and the also the Roanoke Dazzle basketball. So you had your hand in your pulse in the local sports. You know, how important is that for you to just be a part of the just sharing people's story and sharing their games, because you've kind of been doing it, for, if you count your SLS time, I mean, we're talking, north of 5 decades.
Yeah, well, it was an ODAC that you're right. I did the ODAC Sports Report. That was a weekly show we did highlighting ODAC sports. I did that for a couple of years, and we also did ODAC, basketball and football games at different times. And it was a case where, like you say, I did I don't know, a hockey show, one with the baseball back when it was, I think, the Salem Redbirds or whatever. So I always was able to do it. And I enjoy doing it because I think there's a need for something like that. And when you have just your sports on the news, you're not able to go as in depth as I was. And it was good because I also wanted to let folks know about not just you've got the Division I schools, but when you think of the ODAC and the Division III, and the good thing about that was that most of those schools had students who played whatever, football, basketball, and a lot of them were from this area. They weren't the big names, but like I say, you get a guy like Russell Turner and folks like that. It's great.
Okay. Circling back to the high school games that you cover now, you're doing it with Franklin County students who are pretty much getting a good education, learning for you. And this has been going on in different forms for about a decade. I mean,
Yeah.
how easy is it to just see you're doing games with high school kids, and they, from every time I've interacted with them, they take it serious. It's not a joke or a playtime. They
Oh
take
no.
this very seriously. How big and special is it for you to work with them?
Oh, it's great to work with them, and I let people know that they're really outstanding in terms of they work hard. They're very polite. They're very cognizant of doing the job to the best of their ability, and they get the setup prior to the game and all that. And we had Ken Kalinsky, who's now up in Louisa County, and now Kevin Plaster. They are the teachers that handle it, but they don't really do much other than to make sure there's not a problem. And they do an outstanding job. When that first was brought up to me, which was way back when, Mike Bell had talked to me because he was going to do it on my 19 to do these games again. I thought, whoa, high school kids, wow, And I wondered, how's this going to work, and how good is it going to be? And people have been very pleased with the job that they've done. In fact, I know, for instance, Carl York has commented so many times how much he has really enjoyed what they do, because he says he remembers them from way back in the early days, like you say, the JPR days, when we did it with just regular folks, and then since we've done it with these students, they do a great job.
Well, that is awesome stuff. And then let me ask you about this one thing that you have been involved with, and you lend your name to this, but I know you're heavily involved. Um, the Biddy Bowl that has the your name attached to it, and obviously Susan G. Komen and all that. How did you get involved in that? And just talk about the importance of that.
Well, the way I got involved in it was, I'm friends, and again I covered him, but also after he graduated, a guy named Kelvin Casey Bratton, and Casey was a football player, an outstanding track man, went on to have a great career in track at BMI, and he got involved in this with the idea of able to do something that he felt would be good. And he said, would you mind having your name put on it? I said, well, yeah, I mean, that's fine. I says, you can't get anybody better than me. And so I did it. And of course, it was for a good cause. Like you say, breast cancer awareness, the Susan Komen Foundation, and all of that. And so that's how I got tied up with it.
Pretty cool. So, Dave, Mr. Ross, sir, I mean, you're a Hall of Famer. You're in the Virginia Sports High School. You got an honor from the Virginia's High School League for your years of excellence, which is well deserved. I gotta ask you, basically. Oh, your hand's covering up the screen a little bit. There you go.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. Um, I gotta ask you. I don't know if I asked you this. I'll ask you again if I did. Legacy wise, what do you look at your legacy? Because again, I know you're about as modest and as humble as they come, and you don't make it about yourself, but you have played a role in a lot of young people's lives through your broadcast since. And I'm going to take it back. When you started in Roanoke in 1975, here it is 2023. You're 5+ decades. When you look at your legacy, what do you see your legacy, or what do you basically, the big question is, how would you like people to remember Dave Ross as a broadcaster?
Well, I would hope that they would feel, that Dave Ross did a good job, that he did what was positive toward the athletes and individuals from this area, and how, more importantly, that he was good to people and that he was positive, because if I can help somebody, I want to do it, because it's more important than just doing a broadcast. The friends that I have made and the acquaintances I have made, I have really enjoyed, because it has enabled me to just be with fine people, and I've gotten opportunities that I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't been in this business.
Wow, that's something. Well, Dave, I mean, congratulations on an awesome career. My final question is, how long you see yourself doing this? I think you still have a lot of speed on your fastball, so I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. How long do you see yourself going?
Oh, I don't know. That's something I've wondered about, because I mean, I'm not a young man anymore, and it's not that it's physically any trouble, but I just, how much longer do people want to see being around here? So I don't know. I guess at some point, for instance, like I say, Carl York picked this up. So, if at some point that goes down, I mean, I've pretty much run out of
Hmm.
anywhere else to do this
Yeah.
thing. So, I don't know. I'll do it as long as I physically can do it, but more importantly, as long as I would have the interest in doing it.
Wow. Hey, Dave, how old are you again?
76.
Spirit of 76.
Yeah, you believe that? 70.
Wow.
Gosh, I'm old. I'm
So,
old. Golly Moses.
so it's almost to a point you're probably covering players. You might be covering players' grandchildren by now, probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've gotten any grandchildren, but I've gotten a lot of children, like it's for instance, I remember Lamar Daniels, that he was in that first 86 year with Salem. And of course, both his sons, played at Salem. And there are a lot of folks that I have done where their fathers played, or their mothers, because I did both high school girls basketball and so forth. So I mean, it's been quite a few, quite a few.
Well, Mr. Ross, I appreciate you.
Well, no, I appreciate that you'd even want to take the time to talk to
Well,
me. But
you're a military veteran, and we'll air this on Tuesday. But I just wanted to reach out to you and tell you how much I appreciate you and the impact you've had on my life and my career. So thank you.
well, I thank you, and I will say this, I'm glad you did it about the military, because the one thing that I think is important that I learned from military is that you realize how precious life is and how fortunate you are, especially when you've been in maybe a combat zone. And I have never forgotten the many, the some 50,000 plus names on a wall in Washington, D.C., who served in Vietnam, who never made it back. And I want people to remember not just their sacrifices, but the sacrifices of those from ones that we've seen recently, Iraq and so forth, and all the way back into World War II and all.
Awesome, sir. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. You're awesome as usual.
Well, hey, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being my friend.
Awesome. You're like you're a father figure. So thank you for all you do.
Oh, okay. Thank you, my friend.
Mhm.